Over the last few months, I've been conducting consultations with TEF aspirants, and I've noticed the pattern wherein the same 5 questions keep repeating themselves in some form or another across consultations. So I decided that I'll put forward one consolidated video which will answer these 5 questions for all TEF Canada aspirants. So let's get started. Now the first question is, how long does it take? And to be honest, it takes 2 years for most aspirants, and 2 years seems to be the standard timeline to which most people tend to gravitate. I know some people who have successfully cleared the TEF Canada exam and they did it in 2.5 years. There are others who have done it even longer than that actually. But then let me tell you that I could do it in 1.25 years, and that is nearly a period of 15 months with a full-time job. And then there are other people like Benny Lewis that I've been talking about in my previous videos, and there are some other people who claim that they could reach fluency from scratch in a matter of 3 months in a language like French. So it really boils down to the question of how much time you're spending on a daily basis rather than how much time does it take over a period of months or years for that matter. So if you can spend more time in a single day, over a period of months, it will reduce proportionately. I recommend that you study at least 5 hours a day. And when we say study 5 hours a day, it does not mean study with a pen, paper or a book in front of you or a damn grammar book in front of you. It simply means engage with the language through various means and methods for a period of 5 years on a daily basis, and try to do that consistently. You know, it won't make sense that you do it for 2 days and then you take a week's break and then you start again. That way you will be caught in a rut, and that would not lead you very far. So the real answer to that question is that generally it takes 2 years. This timeline can be decreased depending upon the number of hours that you're spending on a daily basis. So while there are these standard timelines, I think rules are meant to be broken and you can create your own timeline. Now this does not even mean that you put artificial pressure and that you kind of pressurize yourself in learning French within 3 months, because I've had some people who had this concern that, you know, Bill C-19 is coming and we want to give this exam within the next 3 months. Can you suggest a strategy or a method by which I can complete this exam within 3 months or 4 months? I mean, obviously those people also had a certain level of preparation when they were asking such questions, but I feel that it's very counterproductive for you to have timelines outside of your control. For example, if Bill C-19 comes in and if things change, then you should be able to give your French exam before that, receive your ITA before that. I think that's too much pressure, and I've made a separate small video on that before, so you feel free to check that out. But I feel that in terms of timeline, it's not a question of how early you want to finish it. It's about it. It is about a general process that the language learning process requires. The timelines therefore depend on your methods, your processes, but the most important metric which I found is that it's about how much time you're spending with the language on a daily basis rather than the number of months you have spent studying. So make the days count, don't count the days, if that makes sense. The second question that I'm asked is, how do I know my current level in French? Now, honestly, I also don't know exactly how do you measure a level, because it's not really a scientific measure. It is only an indicative measure wherein you can say that basis your current understanding, you tend to be at level B1 or level B2. But the real test of your level is actually a mock test. So if you really want to find your current level in French from the perspective of the TEF Canada exam, because that is what matters, right, at the end of the day, then I would suggest go to prepmyfuture.com. It is the best resource for TEF Canada preparation when it comes to exam specific preparation. And basis your current level of vocabulary, your current knowledge of the French language, if you get B1 level scores or B2 level scores in the mock test offered by prepmyfuture.com, then I would say that you have reached the intermediate level from the perspective of clearing the TEF Canada exam. And if you have reached C1 levels in most exams and you're very comfortable and with the listening sections you can speak in French and you can manage writing, then I would say then that is the time when you should start looking at very exam specific preparation and look at the calendar for booking the exam, but not before that. Many people tend to confuse the material that they have finished with the level that they have achieved. Just to give an example, if for example you have completed a vocabulary book which was supposed to be of the B2 level, then that does not mean that you have reached B2 level. Unfortunately, clearing material, or let's say finishing course materials offered by institutes like Alliance Francaise and other institutes or other teachers that you are hiring does not guarantee that you have reached that level. So do not confuse your level with the curriculum that you have completed. What your level is what is indicated in the mock test offered by prepmyfuture.com or some other books that offer mock tests. But the real measure of your level is not the material that you have completed, it is the scores of your mock exam. I hope that answers that question. The third common question that I'm usually asked is that I feel stuck, that I am reaching that intermediate plateau, and how do I get out of that? Now, to be honest, there is no such thing as the intermediate plateau. It is just a feeling that you're not making progress because perhaps you're setting the standards too high. Perhaps you're expecting that you will, learn the language too quickly or whatever. But the real way of actually getting out of the intermediate plateau is actually building vocabulary very, very aggressively, very voraciously. So if you've reached the intermediate level already, you have enough grammar under your belt to be able to clear the TEF Canada exam. Trust me, you don't need grammar after that. What you really need is a rich vocabulary and the ability to use that vocabulary in your own writing and in your own speaking. So if you really want to get out of that intermediate plateau where you feel stuck, I would suggest that build vocabulary very aggressively, very voraciously. Try to assimilate as many rich words and rich phrases in your French as possible, and you will find that you will start having conversations of the C1 level very soon. So if you're really stuck at the intermediate plateau, the simple answer is you are lacking vocabulary to express yourself as much as you want to. So get out of the intermediate plateau by aggressively building your vocabulary. Now the fourth common question that I'm asked is, what resources should I be using for this exam? And there are two parts to this answer. One is that for exam focused preparation, which is that after having learned French up until the B2 level or the C1 level, now you just want to focus on how to give the exam in the best way possible. Then for that, I recommend prepmyfuture.com, and this website is actually a gold mine. It is a paid thing, but I think it's worth every penny that you're investing into it, because it gives you the resources in exactly the same format as you will be receiving in terms of questions in the real exam day, in the same electronic format, because TEF Canada is no longer available in the paper-based format. So you really need to get used to giving the exam on computer, selecting the multiple choice questions, typing on the keyboard, and listening while looking at the screen. So I think this kind of preparation is very essential, and I think prepmyfuture.com really solves that problem by being a computer based resource. So really use that. And also, like, the mock tests which are offered are very similar to the real exam. So if you're done with prepmyfuture.com, you should feel assured that you at least are very well acquainted with the format of the exam, with the kind of questions which are thrown at you, and even the levels which are indicated at prepmyfuture.com tend to be the levels at which you will be judged. Or let's say PrepMyFuture believes that you have reached the C1 level for reading comprehension, then it is very likely that you will receive at least B2 plus in your reading comprehension in the real exam, because the questions are of a similar nature, similar levels of vocabulary, formats are exactly the same. So I think prepmyfuture.com is a very important resource. And apart from that, you can also leverage some books which are also focused on the exam. For example, TEF 250 activities. And then there are other books like ABC TEF, TEFAC exams, and there are a number of books like that. So you can leverage them as well. But prepmyfuture.com is your principal resource because of the format and also like the relevance in the current type of TEF Canada exam which we have been seeing over the years. Now the other part of the question is, how do I learn French and what resources I should be using for learning French? And for me, I would say listening based resources tend to be the best resources, especially for working professionals who do not have the privilege or the luxury of opening books in their offices or even at their homes, when there are children around and there are other things, so many things going on. We just don't have that kind of privilege to sit down and focus with a book for hours together. And that's the reality of the professional life in India, at least. So I recommend using podcasts a lot for your language learning in general. And I made a separate video on the best podcast for all types of language learners. And apart from that, I feel that Netflix seems to be a very important resource which I think is not getting talked about enough. So when we watch Netflix, I think number one is that it really engrosses us into the story and like the overall format of it. The vocabulary is and the phrases which are used are very relevant for everyday conversations, and this is what the TEF Canada exam is judging you on. It is judging you on your ability to handle French in everyday situations, and I think Netflix seems to be offering that kind of exposure to us as outsiders at how actually French people interact with each other. Obviously, like, the language is a little harsh and a little too informal, and we need to apply that filter. But Netflix is a brilliant resource, and apart from that, podcasts happen to be amazing as well. There are other videos in which I have talked about the applications. I feel Memrise is much better than Duolingo, and Duolingo seems to be kind of being like this favorite application. And I have nothing against Duolingo, just that I feel that Memrise is better. Now the fifth most common question which I'm asked is about how should I plan my French preparation? When do I focus on writing? When do I focus on speaking? So the simple answer to that is that it all starts with listening. Listening is the fundamental and the most principal skill that you develop in terms of learning a new language. And this is how infants also learn. They cannot speak, obviously they cannot read or write before they go to school. So they listen and listen and listen to the language until they have imbibed enough to be able to speak. So the first step in your TEF Canada exam preparation journey or French learning journey in general is that really nail the skill of listening. Listen to French as much as possible. Take in the input of real native people who are talking slowly through podcasts, and then develop little bit of grammar, and then focus a lot on vocabulary. Listen until you have enough phrases and vocabulary in your head that you can actually start speaking, and speak much earlier than you feel ready. If you are a complete beginner, you should not wait for more than 1.5 months or even 1 month for that matter before you start speaking in French, start communicating in French, start using basic phrases in French. So the first step is that you start with listening, and you keep developing that skill. Alongside, 1 month later or as soon as possible, start speaking with the real French native speakers through platforms like italki, and I'll leave that up to you if you like Preply or some other platform better. But the idea is to start speaking as soon as possible. Reading, I feel, is something that is happening simultaneously, even if you're watching Netflix with French subtitles, if you're listening to podcasts with the transcripts, if you're reading books in general, even if you're reading grammar books in general. I think reading is something that is happening all the time simultaneously. So there is no stage wherein you start looking at reading as such. One thing that I really recommend, and I made a mistake, was that I did not pay enough attention to the accents at the beginning, because I thought that it's a small thing. It's not a small thing, and small things become really painful if you ignore them at the end. So my recommendation would be that while reading is not something that you are focusing on, do focus on capturing the accents and the gender of the words. Because if you don't do that at the beginning, don't think that you'll be able to cover that up at the end, and that would really constrain your use of vocabulary, especially in the writing exam. And writing exam is very unforgiving when it comes to grammar or, let's say, spelling errors. So make sure that you pay a lot of attention to the accents as well as the gender whenever you are going through the transcripts or whenever you're acquiring new vocabulary. Now I feel that after listening, speaking and reading, reading is also something that you are constantly developing, just like listening. I feel writing is something that comes at the end, and you can look at writing only after having acquired the ability to listen at the C1 level, speak at good enough B1 plus level, and once you have good enough, rich enough vocabulary, that is the time you start investing in your writing abilities. I don't really think that there can be some other people who disagree with this, but this is what I think works for me, and I've seen this working for everyone else. Because logically speaking also, you cannot actually start writing unless you have good enough vocabulary, unless you are very comfortable with using phrases, and that generally does not happen before you have listened and spoken the language enough. And to again bring in the infants, and you know how language learning happens in general in society, people like infants start by listening. They listen to their parents up right from the time that they're born. Then they start speaking a little bit. Then they go to school and they are introduced with the letters and alphabets. And it is much later that they start writing on their own. And I think this is the progression of language learning even for adults. So while I'm not saying that you ignore reading or that you ignore writing, but the principal skills to develop are number one, listening, then speaking. Reading is something that you again keep enriching through acquiring more and more vocabulary and through reading more and more, and this happens simultaneously. And after you have done that for a sufficient amount of vocabulary acquisition, that is the time you start investing in writing. So I think writing can happen 4 or 3 months before you actually take the exam, given that you have acquired sufficient vocabulary up until your 3 to 4 months before the examination. And I feel that writing is a test which is kind of hackable. So that's my advice on the progression and what you should be focusing on as a language learner. Now I also wanted to take this opportunity to make a few exciting announcements. Number one, that I will be posting videos very regularly on the Green French TV channel. I know that I have not been as regular as I wanted it to be because my bandwidth was kind of eaten up with my crazier than usual workplace environment, and the other fact that I had received my invitation to apply. So I was preparing my own application to Canada. And given these two things were happening simultaneously, I just didn't have enough bandwidth to meaningfully engage on YouTube. But now that is not the case, and I will be posting a new video every Thursday in the least, apart from the other content that I will be producing. The other thing is that I have created a Facebook group, the link to which is given in the description below. So you can use the Facebook group to post your questions, engage with me more personally, and I will also use this forum to share more content, share more insights and material on the French preparation. I may also use this group for conducting live sessions wherein you can ask your comments, you can ask your questions, and I can give you my comments on whatever I think is feasible for your particular situation. So this also gives us a more interpersonal interaction platform. So please join the Facebook group if you are very serious about your TEF Canada preparation. Also feel free to leave comments on this video. Let me know your thoughts. If you have a sixth question or any other question that you would want me to answer in the subsequent videos, I'm more than happy to take your input. I reply to all comments, as you can see in the other videos, and I will definitely reach out to you if you choose to leave a comment. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.